Hey everybody, appreciate you guys for joining me here on what you guys may not necessarily be overly familiar with. It is called The Final Buzzer with DeShaun Tate. If you remember from last year that we do this 15 minutes after every game. I'm sorry, 15 minutes at the end of the night for the final game in the NBA playoffs. Once they conclude, we'll recap all the games from that night. So do your part. Go and subscribe to Tate's Take the podcast, um, and follow along on all social media platforms at Tate's Take Hoops, where basketball lives. That's TATESTAKEHOOPS. Um, I want to go ahead and get ready to start recapping the games where we did see what I thought would be a little bit more intriguing games. Wasn't really looking forward so much to the blowouts, but based on the first game, I kind of thought we could potentially get to that point. I just didn't think that we would get to that point. So between two number three seeds and two number six seeds, ironically and coincidentally enough, one out of the Eastern Conference, one out of the Western Conference. And before we get into that, I want to make sure that I preface things a little bit by saying this, because we are going to obviously do this every night, and this is round two of this particular segment or show or part of Tate's Take, kind of an extension, if you will. But every team has something to prove. And I say that because one thing that I'm starting to kind of see through my lenses is that, like, NBA playoff basketball is slowly starting to look very similar to March Madness in a sense, with maybe some of the upsets here and there, but even more so the fact that this thing is totally wide open this year. Like, obviously, like last 2 years in college basketball, you haven't really had any two teams that was. I mean, granted, Gonzaga was dominant, but they still had people that was a little bit iffy, this guy included, on what the end result would be for them in terms of winning a championship. So for the most part, it was still kind of wide open over the course of the last, 700 something odd days or whatever, what have you, 370 something, if you will. Not very good at math. That's why I'm talking to you about basketball. So with that, outside of shooting percentages and so forth. But with that being said, like last year, I feel like we saw a lot of upsets. We saw some buzzer beaters a little bit from in last year's NBA playoffs. And this year, it's a little bit more wide open. With the Lakers last year, I had a good feeling. Maybe not a great feeling, but a really good feeling that they were probably going to be the champions. I don't feel that way this year, and it's not just about the Lakers. I don't feel that way about any NBA team this year. And so I'm not really sure that anybody has necessarily like a leg up on anybody. Like, this is anybody's to win. Somebody plays really bad, you're going home. You play really good, you can go forward. But I don't really think that we'll see nearly as much, getting the feel that there's nearly as much, politics or storylines, if you will, that have played a part going into this year. So with that being said, I just kind of wanted to make that connection a little bit to college basketball because this thing really feels essentially like it's really wide open. Now, going into the game, first game of tonight that I want to recap. Six-seeded Miami Heat taking on three-seeded Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, game two, round one, Milwaukee takes down the Miami Heat 132-98, now leading the series 2-0. I really felt like this was something that Miami could not afford in terms of starting out slow. That's something that they not only did tonight, and I didn't think they could afford to do tonight. They, in a roundabout way, kind of did that in game one as well. But we know that that's something they can't do going into games three and four when they get back to South Beach. Like, we know that. And ironically and coincidentally enough, like me just thinking about it, and I was thinking about this in my head earlier, they share something very similar with the team that I'm currently covering in the Atlanta Hawks. Not just because they're in the same division in the Southeast Division, but even more so the fact that between Miami and Atlanta, both teams this year are playing much like the team that we expected them to play like last year. Didn't really expect, excuse me, Miami to come out and look the way that they did last year. Kind of expected them last year to look the way that they do this year. Even though I get it, it's only two games been played and so forth. I think we all feel pretty confident, particularly for their lack of offensive prowess, if you will. Um, and because they're playing Milwaukee, who has a different chip, maybe not that they don't have a chip, but just a different chip on their shoulder than Miami does. So um, I thought that we would see Miami, what they look like this year in the playoffs, look much like it last year, but it seems like they just kind of peaked early, if you will. And last year's Atlanta Hawks, I thought that, I thought what we see from them this year in terms of, not necessarily about their seeding per se, but more or less the fact that how well that they have played, especially since March 1st, when Nate McMillan took over for Lloyd Pierce, having one of the better records in the NBA too. So granted, yes, the 25 game suspension and John Collins and blah 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 and whatever else may have came into play along with some other things. Maybe didn't have the acquired pieces that they currently have right now. On the roster at that time, but people had high expectations at that time. 365 days later, we see this same Atlanta Hawks team now. That yes, while it does look a little bit different, we still expected to see something, different than what they look like now. So that's just kind of my comparison, how it kind of connected between the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks. Now, with that being said, Milwaukee is the highest scoring team in the NBA. You see that? We know that. They look like very much like that tonight. Uh, and a lot of that is because of the scoring that they added to this team. You know where I'm going to go with this. If you know this guy, I'm a Spartan dude. That's just what it is. Bryn Forbes stepped up for him big time tonight. We'll get into some of that. But not only is he a big piece of the puzzle offensively for them, the fourth best three-point shooter in the NBA, proving that this year. Bobby Portis, while he may not necessarily bring a ton of offensive contribution, he brings more, particularly in the post, something that you don't really get out of a veteran like Brook Lopez because he stands out there, and while it gets on my darn nerves sometimes a little bit too much, standing out there on the perimeter shooting threes, and sometimes I think that's why we end up seeing Milwaukee go home early, not just because of the fact that Giannis Antetokounmpo is not really good at shooting three-pointers himself, nor really good from the free space on the bingo card, which is essentially the free throw line if this is your first time on this show. But even adding PJ Tucker, who everybody knows is a sniper from the outside, and bringing some much needed toughness to this Milwaukee team, I think has been a big contributing part to what they need to take the next step. I've criticized Mike Budenholzer, the head coach, uh, in Milwaukee time after time after time again. I've called him the Rick Barnes of pro basketball. Always looks really good in the regular season, not necessarily nearly as much when it comes playoff time. Maybe they could change that around this year. But again, talking about adding some scoring. And then obviously Drew Holiday in the trade, something else that they needed on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. So definitely want to give those guys some credit there. Milwaukee, which I mean, it was crazy even to think this a little bit at first, just because Miami is such a big team and a physical team. How about plus 13 in the rebounding category in game one? And then as I see it here, rebounding category on tonight, 61, 36, over what is that? Over 20 plus rebounds more than Miami had, and that's just not the Miami way. Like, that's not their brand. That's not what they do. They out rebound opponents, even if it does result in a loss. So they look very uncharacteristic and not like they exactly carry the exact same identity, if you will. So once to throw that out there, they've been out rebounded crazy by over 30, close to probably 40 rebounds collectively over the course of the first two games. Again, something that has to change when they go back to South Beach. Um, I was curious. I wanted to kind of ask the people about this. Feel free in the comment section. You can see down there below on the ticker. Feel free to comment below with any questions and opinions that you may have. That which one is more likely to happen? Like, do you think that essentially Miami gets their act together for game three and game four? Or do you think that we could be potentially looking at the biggest disappointment between, from one season to the next, from one team who is a contender for a world championship getting all the way to the finals, um, and differentiating that between now looking at them this year, and they don't even look remotely close to being a shell of themselves. So which one do you think is more likely to happen again? Give me a follow on Twitter, and feel free to jump in there and let me know what you think. Because right now, probably the easy answer is, because it looks like they're going home early, it's going to be a huge disappointment. But want to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they're a tough team, because they're a veteran club, because they've been here before, and they were the last team to represent the East in doing this before. That they are one of those um, franchises that can turn things around, and maybe this thing is 2-2 going back to Milwaukee. Who knows? But let me know exactly what you think about that. I felt the way when I seen Dwayne Dedman was the leading scorer for the Miami Heat in this game through 3 quarters. And if I'm not mistaken, he may have been the leading scorer for this team on the night, which I think is already a problem within itself. 19 points, 9 rebounds, 8 for 11 from the field, 50% from three in 21 minutes. Credit him, and he's a great guy, by the way, too. As I told you, done some work with the Atlanta Hawks and covering and so forth, and still doing that. He was an Atlanta Hawk twice, actually, through my tenure here in Atlanta covering the team, and a really great guy, great locker room guy, plays really hard, a straight comedian, and I couldn't be happier for him, because I've ragged on him quite a bit coming into the league out of USC, and I want to give him some flowers because he stepped up even when not very many other guys on his team did on tonight. So I just kind of want to give him a little bit of credit for his contribution in that particular way. Um, uh, Another part of the problem, at least I feel, and I think that we've been seeing this somewhat consistently and persistently throughout the course and entire way of the regular season this year, is the combination between Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, who has appeared to clearly have taken a step down um, a little bit, if you will, and that's contribution that they need. Like, they need all the shooting, all the scoring that they can get. They'll be able to get stops. They can live with that, but they just don't score enough points. 98 points, that's not going to cut it. If we're talking about 98 points 15 years ago, we're having a totally different conversation. Not in this NBA. That's not going to fly. So collectively, what they combined for tonight between Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, the two best shooters on this ball club, combining for 14 points, 3 for 11 from the field, 3 for 8 from three, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists. Like I said, definitely not enough. Bam Adebayo, while it has been somewhat of a step up for him just a little bit, he knows that he needs to do more. He knows that he needs to be more. He's bringing the physicality and so forth, but you're not going to surprise guys on year 2 around. So while he definitely has been every bit of a well-deserved all-star and so forth, and giving him his flowers last year for what he's done defensively, and even this year he's been really good, got that high motor, that young Dwight Howard build, and got that Kenneth Faried motor and so forth. Um, you're not going to surprise anybody this time around. Like, I think it's starting to be exploited a little bit, that the struggling offense, or the lack thereof of offense that they have on this team, is kind of starting to show its face a little bit, and it's becoming a little bit easier to prepare for teams that are a little bit more well balanced on both sides of the ball. So again, Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero being guys that have to be able to step up and contribute in some of those ways. Adebayo, 16 points, 3 rebounds. Jimmy Butler, who looked like going in from the beginning of the playoffs last year all the way up until this year, uh, I'm sorry, going all the way into the finals throughout the duration, in the course of that playoffs on last year, looked like he might have been the best player in the league at that point in time. Like, he was just straight killing it. He was a dog. He was just typical Jimmy Butler as we know him to be. He wasn't anything remotely close to that on tonight. Just 10 points for him. Goran Dragic is always that guy, and I think that he was a huge piece, obviously, that they missed out on last year, that helped them get to the point that they were at, but didn't. I don't think he participated in the finals, if I'm not mistaken. But I know he was hurt during that time. Always kind of like that silent killer. Always appears to be that guy that is like, his contributions are always overlooked and always overshadowed by other guys, and underrated and things like that. He's kind of picking up where he last left off and not getting the credit that he necessarily deserves in this league. 18 points, 5 for 11 from the field, but 1 for 5 from three, when your other shooters already are not shooting the ball very well either. Um, is basically a recipe for disaster. Somebody has to be able to put that ball in the basket. So, as far as Milwaukee goes, I want to say enough to say that Giannis, typical Giannis Antetokounmpo, gonna obviously do well from the field because of the way that he plays. He gets downhill, obviously, really strong, long arms. He has the skill set, but I think that his measurements is what ultimately helps him more than anything else. 31 points, 13 rebounds for him. Want to make sure that we tip in his 6 assists on top of that as well. But 1 for 7 from the three is not shocking to anybody. I don't think that's going to come across as much of a surprise to anybody either. But to be able to win games like this while still shooting like that, is obviously good. The problem with that is that I got a good feeling that that's not just about Miami's defense, the little bit that they played tonight, particularly from three. That's just Giannis missing shots still. And you're not going to be playing this particular Miami Heat team going into the next round in the event that that's what happens, which obviously right now that's what looks like it's exactly what's about to happen. Chris Middleton had a really good game. Some things on the box score stat sheet might surprise you a little bit. Probably not the 17 points. 4 for 5, took 5 shots and 100% from three tonight. So didn't necessarily take a lot of shots, went to the free throw line quite a bit and got his money in that way. Pat Connaughton, much like we were talking about Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, who needed to step up big with their outside shooting and things like that. I know that Pat Connaughton is a really above average athlete as well. So he definitely can contribute in some of those ways too, but he didn't do that last year. That's something that's making a difference this year, particularly in this series and today. 15 points for him, 5 threes between him and Bryn Forbes. How many threes? Wow, between those two guys. We're looking at 11. So they went 11 for 18 combined from three tonight. That was the difference maker for Milwaukee on the evening. Especially for Pat Connaughton, who was non-existent last year. Now, Bryn Forbes was also non-existent last year because he was not on this roster. He was with the San Antonio Spurs. Huge pickup for them. 22 points, 8 for 12 from the field, again 6 from 9 from three. So um, the crazy part is Milwaukee pretty much beat these dudes up in every statistical category, and that's why I'm not really a big believer that things will be extremely different when they go back to South Beach. I mean, at this point, I kind of feel like based on the way, the energy, the vibe that uh that the way that this game is trending, not in the right way for Milwaukee. I'm sorry, not in the right way that Miami wants it to go in, but are they gonna win a game in this series? Like, how shocked would you be that the team that just got to the finals not even end up winning a game in the first round the following year? Um, and the verdict is still kind of out on Milwaukee if they're really like that for real or if they're not. So, but yeah, it just got completely obliterated in every statistical category. Um, from 3 point percentage, Milwaukee's 41 to Miami's 28. Free throw percentage is something I think also really hurt Miami. I mean, they couldn't throw a rock in the ocean from the boat. 68% to 90% going in favor of Milwaukee. They got out rebounded like crazy. We discussed that. 14 more assists for Milwaukee all over Miami. Beat them in the steals category, beat them in the blocks category, which is maybe a surprise, I guess, outside of Giannis, just because not only do you have Bam Adebayo on that team, but typically they crack down a little bit better defensively than the way that they did tonight. Ironically enough, Milwaukee still had more turnovers, got really close to 20. They had 17, and it just really didn't necessarily work out in Miami's favor to take advantage of that. And the proof based on that is when you start looking at the points off of turnovers, where that was 7 to 11. The points off of turnovers ended up being Milwaukee ended up getting 22 points off of Miami's 11 turnovers, whereas Miami only ended up getting 13 points off of 17 of Milwaukee's turnovers. So yeah, Miami didn't have or didn't have as many turnovers as Milwaukee did, but they also didn't capitalize on them the same way that Milwaukee did. Fast break points, 25 to 9, double digits in the 20s to a single digit number. Obviously not really good. paint points, outscored them there as well, and had the largest lead of the game, 36. Um, for Milwaukee in a game that Miami never even led in. So, just to give you guys a little bit of peace and update, and for some of you who's going to see this on tomorrow, um, knowing that that this is kind of like the rundown and some of the things, excuse me, some of the things that I saw throughout the game on today. Next game up that will be played, taking place on next Thursday. I'm sorry, this coming Thursday. That'll be Game 3, Milwaukee at Miami. On South Beach, 7:30 p. Eastern Standard Time on TNT. Now, before we go on over to the very next game, want to make sure that we may want to make sure that we do our part in letting the people know exactly what this is. Again, this is um, obviously DeShaun Tate, an extension of Tate's Take, if you will. And I appreciate everybody for coming in and joining me the final buzzer. I'll do this 15 minutes every single night. A playoff game has been played. We'll recap all the games from that night again 15 minutes after the final NBA game concludes. So appreciate everybody for tapping in and coming to check it out, sharing and doing your due diligence of the show. Now I want to jump into the Portland and Denver game that just recently I wrapped up not too long ago. Takes down Denver taking down Portland in a game which I really feel like they were kind of somewhat in desperation mode and really needed to find a way to kind of get that monkey off of their back a little bit. So they now have tied the series 1-1, knocking off Dame Dollar and the Portland Trailblazers 128 to 109. Um, Again, it was a desperation game. They came in with a must-win approach, and I'll be really interested to see how Dame's energy will not only rub off, how much he's going to lead this team going into games 3 and 4, going back to Portland, where they're typically pretty tough to beat. Um, Crazy to think that he had 13 assists in the first game. You combine that with what Dame Dollar had on tonight, which was 10. 23 assists between 2 games. I mean, that's really good. Not obviously just for anybody, but on top of that, a guy that's being asked to score the ball so much, and on top of that, being more of a combo guard than a natural or prototypical point guard, is something that can be on a little bit of a tougher side to do, if you will. Um, just really feeling like for the Denver team that this trade for Aaron Gordon was going to have to be something that was going to have to pay off for Denver relatively sooner than later, if I'm just being honest, especially after moving some of the pieces that they did. Um, Gary Harris and, a few other guys, obviously, not having Jamal Murray because of the injury. Everybody knows about that. So that absence on the offensive end is something I think they really needed to at least attempt to replace, because we know about the high octane offense. But do you have defensive concerns knowing that you don't have Gary Harris anymore, who was part of that trade for Aaron Gordon to Orlando, and then not having Will Barton, who you really kind of set your sights kind of high on to be there, be that perimeter defender amongst other things, and really kind of help lead the team on that side of the ball, considering you don't have that Gary Harris anymore. So uh, to still be able to be on the top half of the bracket without being able to hang your hat or have a defensive anchor on that side of the ball for such an extensive amount of time, something that you definitely want to give those guys some credit for. Seeing the way that they came out, and one reason why I think that they really could struggle potentially. I'm not the biggest Jamal Murray guy, but you have to respect what we saw him do last year. He was one of the hottest names, if not the hottest name, that was in the bubble last year and carried that team throughout multiple overtimes. I can remember that for sure. Trying to find somebody that can sub in and duplicate that, and that's really hard to do when you have guys that are just natural scorers. So I really believe that Michael Malone, rather, is going to be a guy that's going to have to be able to make those adjustments, and he was able to do that on today, obviously. Um, And make no mistake about it, this is when I start looking at guys like Dame Dollar, like Damian Lillard, who wants to do nothing more than to spoil Denver and Nikola Jokic's special season. Jokic is obviously up for MVP, probably in a lot of other people's minds, probably the front runner to win it at this point, especially when you get ready to see what he's going to do during the playoffs. But he's just that type of competitor. Talking about Damian Lillard, always playing with a chip on his shoulder, and just love the edge and the swagger that he plays with. I'm not sure that there's a guy in the NBA that plays with more swag than one um, Damian Lillard does. Um, Charles Barkley, I heard say something very interesting on NBA on TNT, and it's something I've actually been thinking about for quite some time. And that is that he believes that the Portland Trail Blazers, not even just as a six seed, but just by the way that they played tonight, amongst other things, that they underachieved this year. And that's kind of hard to say because they are in the West, and it's very um, because they do play in the West, and I do understand or overstand rather that uh, it is a very competitive and tough conference. Obviously, the one on that side of the NBA, and that's always going to be something that's really tough to do. And I get that. I totally understand that. Um, but they're starting to grow and develop some of those pieces. And while they do send guys typically home from time to time from the playoffs, they end up getting eliminated themselves. And to have the best backcourt in the NBA, especially since Klay Thompson has not been um, active in the NBA this year, that puts them between he and CJ McCollum as the front runners for the best backcourt in the country, and especially much like the NCAA tournament, when it comes to playoff time. Not saying you don't need your bigs, because you obviously need those two. You need everybody. You need your wings. You need the depth, the bench, the coaching matters, amongst other things. But you got to be able to have that backcourt, and they have that. Um, but it's not just that. And here's the piece as to why I do believe that in some ways I can agree with Charles with saying that, excuse me, that they have underachieved because they have some of their guys back that was injured, particularly maybe not Zach Collins, sure, all things considered. So I got to give them some credit, but they do have uh, uh, Yusuf Nurkic back, and just seeing what he chipped in for today is one of the reasons for why it's hard to believe that they can keep like they can get a lead on Denver in this series by 2 games. Okay. Mm, I'm even somewhat questioning if they'll be able to get a lead on Denver at any point in this series. If I'm just being honest, like would it surprise anybody to see Denver go up 2-1 in Portland? Probably not. I like to think that having somebody like Damian Lillard is going to be the guy that's going to keep something like that from happening. And I hope that they embrace and love what he's been able to bring to that town because he's a real ball player. Um, but being the league's best backcourt, looking at what they did tonight, Dame Dollar 42 points, 10 assists, went 11 for 24 from the field, 9 for 16 from three. Dude is taking a ridiculous amount of shots, but that's something that he has to do if he wants this team to win and be successful. 32 points at the half is absolutely ridiculous, but he does need other guys to come through, contribute, assist, and step up. It can't just be all on him. CJ McCollum chipped in his 21, so that's good for him. 6 rebounds, 9 for 12 from the field, so he only missed 3 shots. But where are the other guys? Listen to this stat. Listen to this stat. Listen to this stat. Okay, you got a Nurkic who has 7 points. Okay, 13 rebounds. Congratulations. You should be able to do that. But, you know, he was taken out of the game literally, I guess figuratively, certainly mentally, with going to the bench with only what, like 2 minutes being played in the fourth quarter. I believe so. That took them all the way out of their rhythm. If it's gonna be that easy to do that to Nurkic, it has that feel of it as it's almost just as bad if you were just not even playing in the game the same way that you did a year ago when you were injured. Now, I'm not the biggest Nurkic fan, and I'm not the biggest Jokic fan. I can respect their games and the international style and way of playing, things like that. But to pick up some of these silly fouls, and again, some of them just were flat out silly. Like sometimes you're just not gonna get calls because you're not in your home arena, you're not in your home gym, and I completely understand that. But in other cases, when you're just picking up silly fouls, there can't be an excuse for that when it's on the line because Denver is very vulnerable themselves in some cases. Whether this was considered for Portland a winnable game or not, I just don't think that they had the aggression. Like they didn't put their foot on the accelerator. They didn't put their foot on Denver's neck and make sure that they couldn't get up. You know, they allowed them to rise back up, and part of that is part of that is not always just on the officiating. I've seen some silly fouls out there tonight and some things that shouldn't have happened. Um, that's something that they also cannot afford on their home floor because you got to imagine that Denver is going to get some calls going their way too because they have an MVP candidate on their roster. Um, Carmelo Anthony, and I give him tons of flowers because I love the fact that um, I give him credit because he's a scoring machine. I think we ought to embrace something that he did is he embraced the scrutiny and the criticism that came along with guys saying that he shouldn't be able to play in the NBA anymore and he doesn't really have much of a role and so forth. And he's been really good for them. The problem was that he was not really good for them tonight. 5 points on 1 for 5 shooting, 1 for 4 from three. Something that's not really helping them out in the position that they are in, knowing that they need all that they can get to assist Damian Lillard so he doesn't have to be the only guy out there trying to make something happen. How about the reemergence of a guy named Michael Porter Jr., who I think probably benefited the most from the absence of Jamal Murray? Um, there were some times last year where I was really a little concerned. Wow, that's funny. Appreciate you for checking us out on Twitch, bro. That um is that got oh Gothash? I don't know. Okay, I get it now. Appreciate you for joining us, and I thought that you were Joe Budden. Well, I think I've heard that once or twice. I am not Joe Budden. I don't have Joe Budden money, but um I hope that's a compliment. I think that's a compliment. I don't know. But that being said, while I will say this much, thank you so much for checking out the podcast, my brother. I do really appreciate that. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already and go and tell a friend or tell your mama, tell your grandmama, tell your baby mama. That's just something that we like to call here on this show. But thank you, bro. I really do appreciate you for chiming in and showing some love here on the podcast. Thank you very much. But just kind of getting back to it. Um, this is one of those deals as to where I felt like last year Michael Porter Jr. didn't get all the love shown to him that I think that he was deserving of, the ways he could have changed things away around for this team. And you kind of saw this coming, with some of the energy that he brings to the team. And yes, he could be a better defender. I think that that's something that will come with it, especially considering his size. Like, having that effort, playing with a little extra grit. Um, he still showcases that athleticism, but he has to get a little bit bigger, has to get a little bit stronger. That's going to come with time and just understanding the game amongst other things. But he's been playing a ridiculous style of basketball and putting a really good product out there on the floor. Not really sure that this is the right place of home for him. I think, unfortunately, for Nuggets fans, he might end up going elsewhere and end up developing his game even more. Um, and those are just some of the risks that you take at some point. But while we're not at that stage just yet, take advantage of what he's able to bring to the table as a youngin and maximize what you can out of him while you still can. Tonight for him, 18 points, shot 50% from three. Um, I think when I start talking about how we have to appreciate players Carmelo Anthony, who I just spoke upon, obviously being one of them. There's another one, and that's Nikola Jokic. You know, he has that high IQ. He's not very athletic by any stretch of the imagination. I don't even think he can jump over the cell phone that I'm recording this current podcast on. But nonetheless, um, he's a fantastic basketball player, and that's obvious. I mean, he had a really good night. Is he deserving to be the MVP? I don't know. I want to see him a couple more times. I also want to see what Joe Embiid is going to do with that Philly team, who has been looking pretty good and are going to end up playing on, when are they playing? Philly. So I think what is it? Tuesdays. I think they'll play on Wednesday night, that Philly team. Um but I just think that people should embrace and just appreciate his game because he doesn't have the same style of play. Like, yes, he brought his European style over here and didn't try and change up too much of his game. He doesn't get out of his element. He knows his role, whether it's scoring, whether it's passing the ball, whether it's rebounding the ball, whatever the case may be. He did more than enough of that tonight. And honestly, this is kind of a mild night from a rebounding and a distribution um, standpoint, where you have a Nikola Jokic, 38 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 75 freaking percent from the field. That is ridiculous. And some people are going to be like, oh, well, that's not really that crazy. I mean, he's the biggest dude on the floor, probably. And to rebound the ball like that. But that's just effort because he's not an athletic dude. Like in this league nowadays, can you run? Yes. Okay, check. Can you jump? Yes. Okay, check. Those are two things that if you're able to do in a lot of ways, again, I'm not trying to dig or throw shots at basketball players, but just in comparison to the way that the game used to be played, I get that the skill set is probably a little bit more advanced now versus the way that it used to be. Um, but it's more, you have so many more what I feel like are athletes that are in the game now in comparison to the way that it once was. And he's not exactly that. Like he might technically be an athlete, but he's not your definition of an athlete where you can run fast or you can jump high. He doesn't have that. And that's where I think that we need to kind of embrace or embody what he brings to the table and brings to this game. So those are just a couple of his numbers. Norman Powell, who is a recent addition to the Portland Trail Blazers, is somebody that I don't necessarily consider him to be more of an X factor. He does certainly, in many ways, need to channel his inner former team when he was with Toronto. Some of that production, some of that contribution might be better suited for coming off the bench, probably. I think that's something that they might want to take a look at. However, I'm not really sure if they can do that and be able to sacrifice, what Carmelo is bringing off the bench. Um, but that might be actually what is better for this team going forward, especially if they're going to have some big time decisions to make in the near future, in the event that they don't get out of the first round against the Denver Nuggets. So that is that piece. Um, I also want to go through a couple different things in terms of some of the statistical things that we saw throughout the duration of the game. Um, Paul Millsap, two guys that really contributed big time for this team and for Denver to be able to get this win. Now, a lot of people are not going to pay a ton of attention to. One of the elder vets in the league in Paul Millsap, 15.7 rebounds, shot 5 for 8 in 15 freaking minutes. Like, that's really good for an older guy. Again, can you run? Can you jump? Two things that he doesn't really do all that well, but being able to affect the game and put his stamp on the game in many different ways. So shout out to Paul Millsap and of course Monte Morris, who is a Michigan native as well. 12 points for him, 7 assists on 50% shooting. So it was clear that Denver destroyed these guys in the paint, held a huge lead in the 20s, something that Portland can't say that they were able to do. Crazy part is that Portland didn't, excuse me, Portland didn't shoot the ball very bad at all. They shot 48% both from the field and from three. So they shot it really well. The problem was that they were just not able to get enough stops And so many things just was not going their way. Again, hence why Yusuf Nurkic is such a critical piece to this team. Um, but Denver had double the amount of the assists, than Portland did, and um, they had, I think, what Portland had a quarter of the amount of steals that Denver had. Even more so, had a quarter of the amount of points in the paint. Um, I'm sorry, fast break points that Denver had. Like those are things that are gonna have to get corrected sooner than later, and they're gonna have more than enough time to go back to the drawing board and correct some of those things. Because the next game will be played in Portland. Game 3 on Thursday at 10:30 p. Eastern Standard Time on NBA TV. Now, in terms of what's coming up next, in conclusion, as we get ready to get up out of here, um, Boston at Brooklyn. Brooklyn is up 1-0 with the series lead. That will take place on tomorrow, which if you want to be super technical, on tonight, 7:30 p. Eastern Standard Time on TNT. The Lakers. I don't know why everybody's really, really, really. I mean, I get it in a sense, but I don't know why everybody's really, really, really like considering Phoenix to be an underdog when they're what, a 2 seed in the West and the Lakers are a 7. I mean, I get it. LeBron, AD, this and that, former, defending champs and all that good stuff. However, the writing is on the wall, and one team has just been better than the other team this entire year. And I would imagine I'll be really interested to see what that line looks like for tomorrow's game. So that's going to be taking place on tomorrow. Right now, Phoenix holding the lead for that particular series 1-0 on top of the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. That will air tomorrow at 10 p. Eastern Standard Time on TNT. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, in the nightcap, the very final game of the night at 10:30 p. Eastern Standard Time on NBA TV. The Dallas Mavericks is like a rematch of last year's um, first round game, I want to say it is, where Luca was just like going ridiculously crazy. Something I expect to happen again when they play tomorrow at 10:30 on the Clippers. And this could be the writing on the wall for the Clippers. Like, is it a Doc Rivers thing? That question is about to get ready to be answered, not only with this series, but in the event that they survive the series that are ahead of them. PG-13, Paul George, everybody's going to go back to talking about hitting the side of the backboard in the winding moments of last year. Got something to prove. Kawhi Leonard, who typically doesn't do a lot of talking, like they've got some things that they have to square away. Like they have some screws that they need to tighten. They have some wrinkles that need to be ironed out. And Dallas is not the team after putting Dallas out last year in this exact same situation. It's not one that you really particularly want to be going into. And I want to throw this last little piece out there. So while we don't necessarily have a quick release segment, I definitely want to put that up there on the board because they're doing a really, really great job, obviously, of sponsoring the show. Definitely appreciate them for that. And let's make sure we go ahead and change the brand up here in the top right hand corner so that people can know when they're online and purchasing their items exactly what to look for. There we go. Exotics. We call it look good, feel good, play great. Exotics products.com. All 110% are natural products, no chemicals added. Father's Day is coming up. Make great gifts. Birthdays are coming up for people as well. This guy included right here. I've got different items that I've purchased myself. I've been using them for over a year. Shout out to my dude IG, aka Ivan, man, for showing a brother some love and introducing me to the product. I haven't gone a day without using them, man. So it's been a daily thing for me, and I can vouch for it. I'm just not anybody that puts stuff on their skin. So as you can see down at the bottom on the ticker below, skin restoration, replenishment, razor bump, skin irritation rescue, skin rescue, exfoliation soaps. You got shave therapy, wave activation, shea butters, and body glaze, balms, masks, gels, oils, cleaners, sanitizers, the whole nine, wave kits, beard kits. It looks like I need to make another purchase sometime soon. Get all of that stuff. Exoticsproducts.com. You see it right there at the bottom. I would not steer you guys any other way when you start talking about grooming and feeling good, looking good, smelling good, getting into your element, and just really like tapping in to yourself in that way. But when you get to the checkout, when you get to checkout, you purchase online, make sure that you go in the discount code and put in Tate's Take. Get yourself 15% off, courtesy of your boy right here, man. Make sure that you do that. You can't go wrong with these products. Trust and believe me. Appreciate everybody for checking out the podcast on the evening. Again, we're going to shorten these up a little bit over time, but we're still getting acclimated to a couple things. So I do appreciate everybody for being patient, locking in there with me, showing me some love. And again, just remember that, this is one of those deals in which it is the final buzzer with DeShaun Tate. So in conclusion, every night, 15 minutes after the final NBA playoff game concludes, feel free to come jump in here with me, show your boys some love and so forth. Um, and I would love to just kind of get some interaction with some of you guys and things like that as we do this. Now it's getting ready to be regularly, so be prepared to stay up on a late night tip and have an opportunity for your voice to be heard as well. If you want to come up in here, I'll welcome you into the locker room and we can kick it around for just a little bit. Appreciate you guys for coming through and just kind of listening and whatnot. Remember to go subscribe. That's the word of the day, the word of the hour, the word of the month, the word of the year. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe anywhere that you find your favorite podcast. It's called Tate's Take. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star rating. Feel free to leave a comment as well, a review, if you will. If you enjoy podcasts like this, we're going to start bringing on some different guests as well. So you never know what you're going to get here on our show, as we've had quite a few guests in the past, and really thankful and grateful, appreciative that they've been able to join us, and they'll be able to do some of that. So I'm cooking some stuff up. We're working some stuff up. We're getting some stuff going. So remember, at Tate's Take Hoops, TATES. TAKEHOOPS, where basketball lives per usual. Around this time, tomorrow night after the last game, 15 minutes after. Looking forward to seeing you guys. Until then, see you. Bye.